Once again, we have arrived to one of NASCAR fans' favorite times of the year. It's officially Speed Week in Daytona, the time of year known best for hot temperatures and sun, except on race days sometimes. High speeds and tight packs, and tons of fans and celebrities flocking into the Daytona 500 for NASCAR's special post-Super Bowl extravaganza, their own Super Bowl even, if you will. The Daytona 500 is just something special. Now, while I have attended the last two Daytona 500s, I have elected to not attend this year's Great American Race, opting to take a vacation to California, experiencing the Busch Light Clash of the LA Coliseum instead. Personally, I think I'm not going to miss out on too much by being at home this year. Let me explain why I think this, and it goes back to what some might even call the worst Daytona 500, which was the 2013 Daytona 500. Let's take a trip down memory lane. Much like this year's Daytona 500, NASCAR was introducing a new car, the Generation 6 NASCAR stock car. Chevy rolled out their Chevy SS, Ford came in with the all-new redesigned Ford Fusion, Toyota continued with the Camry model, and Dodge had the Charger. Well, yeah, they had the Charger, but it never raced, and they left. Danica Patrick, in her first official full-time rookie season, made history by becoming the first woman to score the pole award in the Daytona 500. But while the race had all the makings to be an all-time classic, most often remember it for, well, being a single-file train race until the end. But I shouldn't act like people didn't give it their all either. It might often get overlooked at the fact that we did see a lot of cars wrecked in that Speed Weeks, and as one knows, usually these big wrecks are the result of hard racing and perhaps one wrong move while racing hard. In 2013 spring testing, we saw them willing to run into big packs, and ultimately we did have a big wreck in a testing session.
What did you fix?
Whoa,
he says, well,
trouble on the back.
Trouble on the back once again. The
All
9
the
of
cars.
Ambrose goes around, as does the 1. Jamie McMurray, our reigning champion. Brad Keselowski torn up. Regan Smith in the 51.
Both the
Kasey
Penske
Kahne's
cars.
involved.
24, we're done.
And Darrell, I don't know who it was, but somebody changed lines.
Yeah, I saw him
and
moving.
there wasn't a hole there.
I saw him moving back there. Somebody made a move, and there wasn't anywhere to go.
Joey Logano's in it. We're hearing Eric Almirola potentially in this as well. Disappointment on the faces of all the drivers, as though, although they were elated to be able to go out and run with other cars, this is the result of a mistake. There's Kasey Kahne's number 5. They're going to hook that back up to the tow truck and bring it back into the garage. The 14 of Tony Stewart looks like it got through unscathed. Biffle walking back to his hauler.
The 9, and here he goes, but right there, he gets pushed into by...
That's Carl Edwards.
Carl
That's the
Edwards, 99
car. Yeah.
And because Marcus Ambrose was second in line, everyone behind him after that happens either checking up or trying to figure out the line through, and that caught up almost everyone.
That was a. Oh, can we run that one right there? I think that told us more of a tale right there, what we just saw in that replay.
I think what I saw was when the 9 started to pull down, the 99 was going to go to the outside and fill the gap, and he clipped him as he goes by.
Then fast forward to the 2013 Sprint Unlimited, which is what the Busch Clash used to be known as, and of course back then it was accompanied there on the high banks of Daytona versus the short track of the LA Coliseum we saw this year. In that race, once again, we saw hard-nosed racing that resulted in a crash that took out several cars.
Matt Kenseth, obviously they did a good job on that race car.
Trouble turn 2. Tony Stewart gets turned to the apron. Jimmy Johnson is involved. Denny Hamlin into the wall. Jeff Gordon sideways down into the infield. A number of cars crashing and sliding. Mark Martin gets a piece of it. Kyle Busch is in the middle. Hamlin down into the infield. A number of others. A multi-car crash midway between turns 1 and 2.
Service Master Clean Caution number 1 coming out as we were coming to the halfway point of segment number 1. How many cars involved there, Dave?
Well, 3 sit in front of me, totally torn apart. The Denny Hamlin machine, Jimmy Johnson's car, Jeff Gordon's drive to end hunger AARP Chevrolet briefly went up in a big plume of fire out from under the hood. It has extinguished itself. A number of other cars, though, have driven their way back down the super stretch, headed for pit road. I would say 7, maybe 8 cars with substantial damage after a major mix-up here in 2.
Fast forward again in the Daytona 500, early on in that race on lap 32, we'd see a wreck collect a good portion of cars.
first, Ken's at second with a push from Gordon. Oh, Kane! Kane gets around, slides across the track. Dillon misses him. More carnage down toward turn number 1. Montoya, Harvick.
A real low apron.
All with damage as the caution comes out. Well, Keelan Harvick is not Dad's good luck charm today. Let's ride along in the Budweiser Chevy.
2x2 the whole way. Frank, stay high, stay in it, stay in it. We got turned in there, guys. We're tore up, terrible. Hold the brake, hold the brake. All right, let it roll left. You all right?
From 195 miles an hour to junk in about 4 seconds.
Once again, with 63 laps to go, even with most of the field already in the train, we'd see one wrong move result in another big crash.
They were some of the
trouble,
first.
turn 1, guys.
One car down, spinning. Trevor Bayne up to the wall, collects another. That is Carl Edwards. The 5th wreck that Edwards has been involved in this spring. The 34 of David Reagan involved, and that's the 35 of Riverside, California's Josh Wise. We're under caution for the 4th time today.
Something happened to a car going into turn 1, as if it just, I don't know who it was, you'll have to take a look at it, but they lost it going into turn 1.
See Austin Dillon there in the 33, damage to the front end. Trevor Bayne, we mentioned him in the 21. Terry Labonte in the 32 car as well.
Josh Wise all torn up, and his teammate at Front Row Motorsports, David Reagan and David Gilliland. My goodness, all 3 of the front row cars of Bob Jenkins taken out in this pileup.
Let's see what happens here. I looked up, I
Single
saw a
file
car
in front
spinning,
and
I
behind
couldn't
him.
tell why.
27 is the first car out of line in front of you. Up. Hold it, hold, no caution. Caution is out. Caution is out. Caution is out.
Here's Brad Keselowski on the outside of Carl Edwards. Rudeman just ahead.
See what happens here. I just looked up, I guess it was the 2 car I saw going, looked like he was down on the apron sideways. Ooh, looked like possibly.
But it looked like they started accordioning up in front of Brad Keselowski.
Very similar to what we saw at the start of the race, Larry. Just somebody slowed up a little bit and it caused that accordion effect.
Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in 17, he just basically stopped and he went on by.
Now Joey Logano was not involved, but they're working on his car. Pit road back at the fuel cell area. There is Austin Dillon. And David Reagan's not going to make it back, nor is his teammate David Gilliland.
Now, one can argue that guys certainly did give it their all that day, but in reality, this is kind of just the truth of this kind of racing. It doesn't matter how much they try to avoid it, there will be some kind of big wreck. Even in the 2021 Daytona 500, following the scary crash Ryan Newman went through, a lot of guys sort of took it easy in that one, but in the end of it, they did go for the win, which resulted in a fiery crash in the final lap of the Daytona 500. Likewise, that 2013 Daytona 500, it was kinda sorta that way, but definitely more anticlimactic. Some guys in the back wrecked, Danica Patrick somehow dropped from 3rd in contention to 8th, and Dale Jr. somehow made it up to 2nd, while Jimmy Johnson, who led a majority of the closing laps, stayed right where he was to win his 2nd Daytona 500. All in all, this race might not be that bad, but most still really just remember this race for ending in a single file train race where it felt like nobody really tried. And perhaps part of that reason could be similar to where the Cup Series find themselves today, but maybe to a lesser extent. In 2013 being the first race of the year with a new car, well, yeah, there weren't as many available, but it was at least enough quantity available to have backup cars. And of course, the cars they ran at Daytona were going to be sort of different from the cars they took to the other tracks the following weeks. This year, NASCAR teams do not have that luxury. There's legitimate concern on the parts available to produce more cars for the rest of the year. These same cars they use at Daytona, they can transfer those cars over to other tracks. Many teams are saying with 100% certainty that if their car survived the Busch Clash, then great. because that might have to be a backup car for Daytona, or that car will likely end up back on the West Coast in one of the races out there in the West Coast swing. For some drivers like Kevin Harvick, they have already decided they would not even take a backup car. The Ford team was reported to travel to Daytona with literally just one car this season. Throughout the last 2 years since COVID threw a wrench in things, practice was eliminated for this very reason, to put less burdens on teams so most could go to races with just one car. But now we are in situations where practice may be back, but the supply of cars just is not there to support having multiple cars on hand. Not to mention, we've already seen at the Clash alone just how much damage can be done to these cars on a track with relatively low impact speeds. Several cars experienced mechanical failures like Tyler Reddick and Chase Briscoe. Eric Almirola had severe damage to one of his wheels after a slam into the wall at the Clash. Justin Haley really damaged the front lip of his Chevy Camaro following the incident with Kyle Larson. Now, I'm just a fan watching from afar, of course, but the concern does go beyond me and into those actually working in the sport. For more on what I mean by this, take a listen to the concerns shared by spotters TJ Majors, Freddie Kraft, and Brett Griffin on a recent installment of Dirty Mo Media's Door Bumper Clear podcast.
We kind of had some concerns about if you weren't in a good transfer spot, do you go into a little bit of okay, you're not going to make it in, let's not knock all these fenders off for no reason. There was talks like that because I don't think anybody has a ton of cars.
I heard multiple teams saying that they were just there to race and make sure their car came back. I mean, I had pieces on my car yesterday that are going on my Daytona 500 primary car.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people are in that position. That Stewart Haas has been very vocal about this for a while because they skipped the Daytona test too, right? Mm-hmm. Because they didn't want a chance tearing up a car.
Yeah, I mean, I would be willing to bet. I don't know this for sure. I know of a few teams, but I'd be willing to bet there's not a multi-car team that has a backup car for every one of their cars. You know what I mean? Like you don't. I'm sure you're not going with two backup cars.
If you're in contention for the win, then it's a different thing. Go for it. But if you're not, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to knock.
I'm just saying, like even when we get to Daytona, I doubt that they're like Stewart Haas ain't gonna have four backup cars, and I don't think 2311 is gonna have two of them. You know, I don't know any of the major teams that are gonna have enough backup cars that if they wipe out their whole fleet, they could just all get backup cars.
And I hate to say this, but we could wipe out a fleet
easily. And I think that the
duels. I mean, the duels are. I don't think we see a lot of pack racing. I think we may see some single file alignment to go out there and check speeds and whatnot. But I don't see a lot of pack racing and practicing. I think we only see the duels in the 500.
Yeah, I think you see some manufacturers get their guys together. Okay, let's just go out there.
Yeah.
You lead for 2-3 laps, switch it over, let somebody else lead. Maybe make some conservative moves, but nothing like
crazy. NASCAR picked the vendors to supply all of these parts. So, for example, RCR is building all the lug nuts, right? Barney Visser is building a lot of the suspension parts, right? And I'm hearing those kind of things are now more readily available. I think where the struggle is like with the body parts, the 5-star. And what it's doing is it's not only putting us behind in the Cup Series, that same vendor supplies the Xfinity Series bodies. So now the Xfinity Series bodies are also hard to get. So what we saw early on, and if my source is correct, is that the distribution was even. In other words, if we had 40 people needing something, they made 40, they gave them out. Well, now they're going off of points. Well, if that's the case, now those slower, lower budget teams and smaller teams like Colleague Racing, like Rick Ware, we just talked about how impressive they were out west. Well, if they're not getting the same opportunity to get the same parts as everybody else in the front, well, they're going to be in trouble, right? So from a pure inventory management perspective, if NASCAR handpicked these vendors, NASCAR's got to be very careful that the distribution's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Daytona is going to look a lot different than Daytona has in the past. I think practice is going to look different. I think the races are going to look different. I mean,
thin.
Yeah, it's going to be. You got to remember, like when we ran Daytona 500 last year, if you went out there and destroyed your race car, you had 2 months to fix it go to Talladega. You're bringing this thing to the West Coast. I don't know where you're running it, whether it's Vegas, California, Phoenix, but you need it in a week and a half to go to the West Coast again. So, whether there's two things I think play into this Daytona 500 that is going to be interesting to see. How much guys are willing to get in that pack and risk destroying a race car that they might need in a couple weeks. And listen, NASCAR has done a lot whether it's behind the scenes or not, to alleviate the concerns of these drivers about how safe this car is. But with that being said, I don't think anybody wants to be the first one to really find out, and I think that the level of aggression, we've seen some guys are willing to be aggressive at these tests. They're pushing and doing what they want, and NASCAR announced the rule that they're not going to have a rule about pushing. So, I mean, it can get very aggressive out there, but I think you're going to see a lot of guys maybe ease back on the aggression level just for the fact that they don't want to be the first guy that wrecks this thing and risk something happening.
So with all of this that I can look at from this NASCAR fan's perspective, I'm not anticipating anything special from this year's Daytona 500, primarily because while this race is certainly important to win, a lot of teams understand the importance of being prepared for the next week's race. Even one of the Daytona 500's most storied traditions will come to a halt this year with the shortage of cars. Traditionally, the winning Daytona 500 car will be placed in Daytona's Motorsport Hall of Fame for 1 year, but this year, that's not the case. The team will keep their winning car to be used in the coming weeks. Instead, NASCAR will do a full scan of the car, complete with marks and confetti from the race, much like the process Lionel Racing uses for producing race-win diecast, and they will be creating a one-to-one wrap of the race-winning car on a show car of the next-gen prototype models that will go into the Motorsports Hall of Fame instead. For all those reasons, if you want my prediction of this year's Daytona 500, realistically, so far in practice and early testing, I think this new car has great closing speeds and these cars certainly can draft with one another. But this year, I think there's more importance on keeping the car you bring, and I anticipate that this year more than others, winning the pole award or qualifying in the front row may be important for winning the Daytona 500, because I am anticipating a single file train race in the 2022 Daytona 500. So for a guy like Alex Bowman, who has qualified on the front row of the Daytona 500 for the last 5 seasons, this could be very important to do that once again if the racing is as I anticipate it to be. Now, while I think this year's Daytona 500 may be more tame than usual, I think we will get back to normal by the time we get to Talladega later in the spring. I think we will at least see a good reserve of cars by then. I think we will see a more traditional Superspeedway pack style racing when we get there, and I think the rest of the Superspeedway races this year will be back to normal again. But just this year's race, expect a train. That's all I can say. But let me throw it back to you guys down in the comments section. Am I wrong? Will the racing be single file like I think? Personally, I'd like to be wrong. I definitely want this to be a great race, being the biggest of the season and first Daytona 500 with a new car. Who do you think will win this year's Daytona 500? Leave your thoughts and predictions down below in the comments section. If you are new to my channel, then I invite you to leave a like on this video and be sure to subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon so that you get alerts for when I post a new video on this channel. If you're a NASCAR fan, whether old school or new school, I probably have something here on this channel that you're going to enjoy, so I really want to invite you to stick around. If you happen to be a new watcher of NASCAR, then same thing, stick around. Watch some of my older videos, and you might just learn something you never knew before about NASCAR. Maybe you can understand why I love the sport so much, no matter what changes. As always, thanks again to my Danny B super fans for your continued monthly support as a channel member. It's greatly appreciated what you do for my channel. Be sure to tune in to the NASCAR Weekly Podcast Season 5 as well, available here on YouTube as well as other popular streaming platforms. This week, Eric Estep, The Iceberg, and Black Flags Matter are together in person down in Daytona to break down their thoughts on this weekend's season opener, and they might just have a few special guests pop in. Unfortunately, there was a little delay in trying to do it live as we usually do due to the Wi-Fi at the place they were staying at, but they did get together to record it, and it will go up on Eric Estep's channel at some point this week. And then next week, you can join us on my channel live for the first time in 2022 as I host the podcast for the first time this year, as we will be breaking down everything that went down in the 2022 Daytona 500. I look forward to seeing you all there, and until the next video, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye guys! Hey race fans, thanks for watching this video from DannyBTalks. If you're new to my channel, please be sure to hit subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss another video from my channel.